Hello, BookTube. The LA Times recently announced its long list for its book prize, which is always an interesting prize, always a lot of meaty stuff. And they covered a whole bunch of categories. You may have seen Peg, the book prize addict, did a video in which she talks about their nominations for debut fiction. And I will leave a link to it so that you can check it out if you didn't. But there are a bunch of other categories that I wanted to opine about. I have, aside from specialty categories, lifetime awards, specifically named awards, that sort of thing, there were 8 other categories. And although a few of them are duds for me, like, for instance, there's a whole category called current interest that had, I think, 5 nominees, and none of the nominees were any good. And in the broad heading of current interest, I could easily nominate 5 that were spectacularly good. So I'm not really sure what the judges were going for there. The same thing with poetry. If Henry Wadsworth Longfellow isn't nominated, then I don't have any stake in the game. And they had a YA category that had, I think, 5 nominees, but it doesn't matter because Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give is going to win and cannot not win. So same thing with. There was another. Oh, there was also a category for graphic novels, but it was there were nominations, but they were all 500-page black and white, poorly drawn works about a Croatian tractor mechanic who has leukemia and doesn't make it. Just the sort of thing you want to warm up to on a winter day. Not exactly, in other words, the kind of graphic novel content that I consume. And the same thing that the YA category seemed a little perfunctory to me because the whole award and everyone involved with it would be shut down on social media, at their workplace, in their home, in divorce court, everywhere, if The Hate You Give doesn't win. The same reason sort of applies to the fiction category. The fiction category has 5 nominees. There's Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. There's Victor Laval's The Changeling. There's Claire Massoud's The Burning Girl. There's Vivek Shambag's Ghachar Ghochar. And there's Jasmine Ward's Sing, Unburied, Sing. And the whole thing is just window dressing for Jasmine Ward to win. I don't think any of the others are even seriously in the running. And that's a shame because, first of all, I thought Sing, Unburied, Sing was competent. Period. And has been just unbelievably overpraised. In a way that I wish I could tell the overpraisers is going to hurt the author, not help them. Yes, it will make them a millionaire, but it will hurt their work. I've never seen it fail to hurt the work when a book gets praised like that one did. But the sad part is that that Vivek Shambag's book is really good. Ghachar Ghochar is really good. In a raw, uncompromising kind of way, it's really good. I wish that it would win. But that leaves us with 4 other categories that did have some meat to them. I think there are also some foregone conclusions in a couple of these, and that would depress me. But the LA Times Book Prize, I might be wrong about all of these. The LA Times Book Prize judges have surprised me in the past. And the first category I want to talk about is the mystery thriller. I'm going to read off the categories here. There's Michael Connolly's The Late Show, Paul LaFarge's Night Ocean, going with that really striking cover. Attica Locke's Bluebird, Ivy Pochoda's Wonder Valley about California, and Joyce Carol Oates' A Book of American Martyrs. Now, if you know anything about these books, ask yourself, which of those is not like the others? Saying that Joyce Carol Oates' immense book, A Book of American Martyrs, is a mystery thriller along the lines of Michael Connolly is like calling War and Peace a big book that's mostly about equestrian military maneuvers. There isn't a mystery thriller element to the Book of Common Martyrs. I don't know what it's doing in this category. Instead of in the fiction category, we would tromp all over everything else. So it was genuinely struck me as really strange to see a list that starts with Michael Connolly and has the Book of American Martyrs on it by Joyce Carol Oates. So in a way, I'm hoping, even though her book is one of the best things, fiction or nonfiction, on this entire list, I'm hoping it doesn't win. because it'd be kind of embarrassing for it to win for such a category. But then there were 3 nonfiction categories that I wanted to talk about because as those of you who've been watching this channel for a while will know, I mostly read nonfiction and I mostly review it. I'm lucky enough to mostly review it. How horrible it would be if because of course literary fiction runs the table in the review world, most of it, and I sometimes think how horrible it would be if I was a victim to that and yet loved nonfiction and could never write about it. So I'm very glad that I get to write about nonfiction mostly. But the first category I want to mention is science and technology, which I love. I love books on it. And some of the ones here I want to mention. First one is Cornelia Dean, The Making Sense of Science, which I haven't read. Then Jennifer Doudna and Samuel Sternberg's A Crack in Creation, which is about genetic manipulation, and which I thought, you know, when we talk about nonfiction, especially science, we say that sometimes it had nerdy dry spots. Well, A Crack in Creation was pretty much one long nerdy dry spot. but the next one is Behave by Robert Sapolsky, which you've heard me praise on this channel before. It's an incredible book. You should all read it. It is an incredible book. Something thought-provoking, thought-changing, paradigm-shifting on literally every page, which I don't see in many books, especially books like Science and Technology that you'd think they would be rife with it. The last book I remember reading that struck me this way was The Ancestor's Tale by Richard Dawkins, where you don't know what direction every single page is going to jump, and you're going to rethink things a lot. So I was very happy to see it on this list. Then Max Tegmark's Life 3.0, which, as you can tell from the title, I mean, sometimes the authors aren't the biggest fans of their book titles, but this one telegraphs the book. It's got a strong grafting of BuzzFeed on its writerly genetics. I'll just put it that way. It's not the treatment of its subject, which is the improvement of the human condition through technology, that I would have wanted it to be. And then the last one is I can't remember Matthew Waller's The Why We Sleep, which is all about human sleep patterns and the history of it and the understanding of old neurology and whatnot. And the clear winner here is Behave by Robert Sapolsky, and I'm really hoping it wins. That would be nice. Because although critics have been universally favorable to it, I kind of wanted it to catch on popularly more than it has. But then the last 2 categories I want to talk about are my two favorite categories, biography and history. And for the history category, we have Steve Alford's London's Triumph, which is about, it's a fascinating book. I liked it a lot. I'm not sure that it's, well, if this is a case, I'm not sure that I would have put it on a list of the best, but this is a case where there's wiggle room for a group of judges to say, well, I think it was. It didn't strike me as that way, but it's still a really, really good book, all about the incredibly short period of time in which London went from an almost provincial, middling-sized village to a world superpower. That happened in far less than one lifetime, even by the shortened lifetimes of the Elizabethan period, and it's fascinating. Absolutely, it's not new ground at all, but I loved it. Then the next one is Mark Bowden, Huey, 1968, his exhaustive study of one particular debacle during the Vietnam War that was terrific, just terrific, almost Homeric in its power. He digs into the eyewitnesses and the original documents. Just an amazing work. Then Dan Egan. I'm very happy to see this book on this list. Wouldn't have expected it at all. The Death and Life of the Great Lakes, which I think I hauled it on this channel. I got it and didn't have much hope for it beyond just a regional appeal and also the inevitable doom and gloom saying about the fate of the Great Lakes in general. The Great Lakes are drying up. They're disappearing. The great aquifers that have fed them for millennia are emptying. being emptied by humans. So it's only a matter of time. It's not a lake's not like an ocean. Once its fate is sealed, there's no coming back. There's nothing you can do about it. And I was when I got the book, I was kind of thinking, okay, well, that's the sum of what it will be. But Egan makes it more than that. It really is a remarkable book. So I was happy to see it on this list. Then Frances Fitzgerald, The Evangelicals, which is her gigantic history of the evangelical movement in America from its beginning to the present day. All the ramifications of it. The frauds, the political puppet masters, the true believers. Just an amazing work told with almost Vulcan detachment. So that, which you might think would hurt it, because it's, of course, a passionate subject. It's not like a textile history. But that actually ends up helping it. It saves the author from chasing down rabbit holes that would have sunk the main strength of the book. I thought it was fantastic. And the last one is Richard Rothstein's The Color of Law, which is about segregation and which did chase down rabbit holes and was predominantly shrill, and which I'm worried is going to win for this category. I don't know. Some years the LA Book Prize is obsessed with current events and virtue signaling, and some years they're not. Some years they don't care at all about that. They're just going after looking at the books, under glass. I don't know what will happen this year, but I'm assuming the worst, because this is, in America, such an incredibly politically charged period that it almost seems like there are no neutral people anywhere. So I don't know. I don't know. We shall see. Of course, on that list, the best book is The Evangelicals, but I don't feel confident at all predicting that it will win. And then the last category, my favorite kind of writing, which is biography. And there are some major things on this. These are five majorly good books. 5 things that I can wholeheartedly recommend to anybody, which is wonderful and rare. You'll notice that there's no other category here where I can look at all 5 books and say you can't go wrong, no matter who the winner is. If you pick any one of these on the list, you'll read a great biography. I want to go down the list here. The first one is Ron Chernow's Grant, which you've seen the whole psychodrama on this channel. I was worried about it before I got it, because I loved his Alexander Hamilton biography. And then he wrote a huge biography of George Washington that was horrible. Not just boring and not just credulous, but horrible. And so that's 50-50. I wasn't counting his earlier books. I was just thinking of those 2 great American biography tomes, things that are clearly meant to dominate the bestseller list for a year. The one was great, the other was terrible. And so you got this next one. And I was thinking, okay, well, he was deeply involved in the Broadway show Hamilton and in swanning about the Broadway show Hamilton. He was deeply involved in all the ancillary events that go along with being the intellectual house biographer of a hit Broadway show. What possible time or effort could he have had to devote to Grant? So I went into the book kind of fearing the worst, and it's incredible. It's an amazingly good book. If anything, it's better than his Hamilton book along the same metrics that made the Hamilton book great. It's eloquent, it's hard, it's evaluative rather than the hagiography that was the Washington book. I was so relieved. I thought it was just fantastic. And that's the first one on the list. Then the next one is Jonathan Eig's book, his big biography of Muhammad Ali, which I wrote about. I don't know if I wrote about it for the Smart Set, and I'm not sure that they've run it yet. Maybe they haven't. But I loved it. It's just an incredible book. Totally different from Ron Chernow's Grant. Ron Chernow's Grant is a standard, solid, 4-square, meat potatoes biography. And Eig's book is every bit as thoroughly researched. He talks to everybody that knew Ali who's still alive. Researches every last newspaper story. God, I can't imagine how much time he spent rolling through microfiche at old libraries. It's incredible. He knows everything there is to know. Watched every inch of film footage over and over again to get the smallest nuance and tells it all in an electric style. Doesn't read anything like what you would think of as a major doorstop biography. It reads more like James Ellroy. And it's amazingly good. Oh, it's just amazingly good. It is the first great biography of Ali, and I can't imagine one being done better. Certainly, the combination of the writing ability and the access to all of those original sources, I can't imagine one outdoing it in that combination. And then the next one was John Farrell's big biography on Richard Nixon, which again I went into with trepidation, because even after all this time, I still find it hard to. I knew that I was going to write about it. I'd been commissioned to review it, and I even after all this time, I still find it hard to approach the subject of Richard Nixon with dispassion, with that one mental step back that you need to do as a book reviewer, or you're no good to anybody. What's one of the very rare book reviews in my life where I was worried that I wouldn't do a good job, where I would turn it in and an editor would say, "Okay, something's going on here. What's up?" And I would hate to hear that this late in the game. But Farrell made it easy not to do that, because his book is just magisterially good, just amazing. The best Nixon biography. We live in a golden age of these things. There's the best Nixon biography in one volume that I've ever read, and I've read them all. And I admit, partially, I may have been helped. Some of that psychic poison that I've always associated with Richard Nixon. When I read about him, I remember what it was like when he ruined something, and it's impossible to point out to people who don't know what I'm talking about, because the thing that he ruined was intangible. We're not talking about a third-rate burglary. We're not talking about petty obstruction that wouldn't even be a slap on the wrist in 2018. We're talking about something else, an intangible that he destroyed. And he did it knowingly and willingly because he thought it was for saps. One person destroying the intangibles of the whole country because he thought it was for saps and because he thought that it was in his way. And that has always made the subject radioactive for me and difficult to think about, much less write about. And I admit that for this Nixon biography, I was helped in a small degree because, and I'm sure that there will be trolls out there who will disagree with me, but I'm looking at this thing from a very long vantage point, and I am looking at it through facts. And I can say with complete confidence that Richard Nixon is no longer the worst president the United States has ever had. The United States is currently living through a far more vulgar, venal, small-minded, would-be dictator than Richard Nixon ever was or dreamt of being. What happens at the end of that experience 7 years from now, I have no idea. But it certainly won't be outraged Republican members of Congress marching to the White House and saying, "You gotta go. You're toxic. You have to go. This is beyond the pale of how public servants are supposed to behave. And you're going to drag us all down with you." That isn't going to happen. So, and being infuriated over that in the last 2 years, helped with the writing of a review of this book. But even so, even if I hadn't had that, I feel certain that Farrell would still have made it possible because his book is so good. So, we're right down the list here. Ulysses S. Grant, Muhammad Ali, Richard Nixon. If you want a big, serious jumping on point, a book to read, one book to read about any of those people, and you're rightfully saying to me or just to yourself, I don't have the time to devote to reading a library about these people. I want one book. You've got 3 in a row right there. And then the next one on the list is by Adam Federman. We saw it on this channel. It's called Fasting and Feasting. It's a biography of Patience Gray, who was a food writer, a food critic. And it was good. It was very readable. It like the Ali book. It did miraculous work with primary sources, so that like the Ali book, anyone later on who wants to write a Patience Gray biography will have to refer to this book. But Well, anyway, I'll come back. We'll go to the last one. The last one is Laura Dassow Walls' big biography of Henry David Thoreau, which is exactly the same as the first three. Magisterial, impeccable, and an essential road stop on all future map works. So anybody doing a Thoreau biography 50, 60 years from now is going to have to go back to her book. They're going to have to establish, at least in the beginning, a dialogue with her book, because it's the Thoreau biography for a generation. So you look at those four, and then you look at Patience Gray, I have to wonder, what Patience Gray is doing on this list. It's a far humbler biography than any of the other entrants on the list, and she's unknown, unlike all four of the other people on the list, and even once you know about her, she's still of only limited interest, unlike the other four people on this list, which it leads me to think one of two things. Either somebody read that book and loved it and just insisted on it being there in preference to 9, 10, 11 alternates that I could easily think of from 2017. Either that, or the consensus among the judges was to give the award to that book, and the others are there for window dressing. I don't know which, of course, of those is true, and I really hope that it's not the second. The only reason that makes me bring it up at all is that I get the strong impression from a lot of these categories that happened. That, in other words, the thing was reverse engineered. Here are the things we're going to give the award to. Now, what other things can we put on the list? Instead of what things can we put on the list and then figure out what we're going to give the award to. That always drives me nuts. I'm hoping that isn't the case here. The only reason I bring it up is because sometimes the LA Book Prize has done that to me, and it's made me wary. but anyway, I will probably remember to list all of these down below, or at least a link to their page so that you can see them. The main point I want to make, apart from predictions, because predictions are, they're fun, but they're always hit or miss. The main point I want to make is that the list for biography and history, those two lists are great. So if you, like Peg, love to take some reading suggestions from the long list of literary prizes, with these two, history and biography, you can't go wrong. There's barely a bad entry in either one of them. And the biography list is aces. It's just aces. I don't understand the Patience Gray one. The only thing I can think is that it's there for some reason other than the obvious. Like, for instance, what about the possibility that that the judges were saying, well, all of the other four biographies are about men. Surely want a biography about a woman. Okay, but if that's your rationale, it still leaves 9 or 10 alternates that are better than this. So, I don't know. I don't know what it's doing there, but I think that's fascinating. And I love that there's kind of an odd penny in the bunch. But anyway, that's all for now. I wanted to do a quick walkthrough of the LA Times Book Prize. I asked Peg if it was okay, and she said yes. Just in case you're wondering if she's going to take me behind the woodshed. No, she said it was okay if I talked about the same prize she talked about. So I'm gonna wrap this up for now, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.